Guys, welcome back. Unorthodox Perspectives, episode 5. And today we have our first guest, Justin, joining us. So, really looking forward to bringing on our first guest onto the show. And that's what we're going to be doing here, guys, mixing up a few conversations between discussions, between Leroy and myself, and then some guests going to be joining us every month. But, Justin, how are you doing, man?
I'm well, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we are as well. Leroy?
Yeah, man. I'm good. I'm good.
You're all good. Awesome, guys. So, Justin, how about do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? People know who obviously I am and who my co-host is. So I'll hand it over to you. Share a little bit more about you, and then the topic, guys, is all about actually Justin's mantra, which is about being uncommon ultimately, and so really theming into kind of our show here about unorthodox perspectives and being unconventional and everything. So anyway, Justin, hand over to you, share more bit about you, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Yeah, so like Luke said, I'm kind of I fit in perfectly with this show. I'm kind of an unorthodox guy. I am a speaker, life coach, and author by trade, but I'm just a regular dude. I'm 32, I'm married, got 2 beautiful, crazy kids. And my big purpose, the whole, I guess, overarching mission behind that be uncommon phrase is to help ambitious people who really want to be, do, and have more in life start stepping into that and start really developing the clarity and the confidence that they need to actually start walking that out in their life. Research shows that only 3 out of 10 people said that they were happy in their life. And that, when I saw that statistic, it just blew my mind. And it just lit this fire inside of me to say, you know what, I got to go out there. I got to do my part, use the skills, the talents, the gifts that I have inside of me to empower that statistic to change, to get more people to wake up to lives that they're excited about. So that's really what I get to do every single day.
That's amazing. And Leroy, just kind of ask you, bring you in here, like when you kind of seen that as like the topic, like, being uncommon and everything, what does that mean to you? What was your first thoughts around that?
I was kind of like in excitement of just to find out what your uncommon is. You know what I mean? Because that's what I love about hearing how other people look at life, because it's a different perspective. So you may say you're helping youth or you're helping men, but how you do it is where the perspective differs, and which is uncommon, which is very interesting. So like I can't wait to hear more of what you do, man. Like I was really excited about it. Yeah, man, definitely.
Awesome. And I was kind of nervous, honestly, at first of using that language, because I had adopted that mantra for me personally before I had really discovered who David Goggins was. And if you don't know who he is, crazy ass dude, got a great story. But he talks about being uncommon and uses that word a lot when it comes to his content and things like that. But it's a different level of uncommon that he's talking about and what I'm talking about. My definition of being uncommon is really connecting with who you are and what you want in your life, standing authentically and firmly in that truth, and then going out and creating your life as a result of that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Like yeah, you like that, man.
Because if you think of last week's episode, we were talking about literally having to look from within to make that change out. It's an external, like if you can't drive your life based on external influences, but it has to be internally inspired. And I really love that, man.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So last week, just for a bit of context, Justin, we the topic was about like other people's expectations of us and our own intentions, and sometimes people get into like that, I suppose like way of life, of, other people have expectations of them and like living life from that kind of standpoint. And so what we were discussing was kind of like all around that ultimately. And some of the things that I was sharing was that actually living from that, from like inside out, and not from outside in. And so obviously, it goes along with what you're sharing as well, of like who you are. And so then my question is like, why do you think that people don't start that journey of truly like finding out who they are and just play kind of conforms, I suppose, to what other people tell them, or then just get into like cycles or habits and everything, and then just don't really start that journey ultimately?
Honestly, I think, Luke, it's more of a societal issue. It's an overarching issue, especially in more Western, industrialized, technologically driven cultures. We are brought up with this idea that we are to be dependent upon other people. And in certain ways, obviously, we have to be when it comes to our food, our safety, our security, things like that. We do need to be dependent upon other people to provide for our well-being. But the problem is that when it comes to our minds, like y'all talked about, the internal work, we're never taught that we need to be dependent upon ourselves. Like, think about it growing up. How many times were you told to trust your gut, to do what you thought was right, as opposed to how many times were you told what to do? And so whenever we're brought up with this idea or this belief that we're supposed to look outside of ourselves for the answers, whenever we get into adulthood, that's our natural programming. That's what we do. So we start looking at everybody else around us. We start looking at what path did they travel. We start seeing, okay, what are the things I'm supposed to do? What are the shoulds? Like I say all the time, if you're not careful, you're going to should all over your life, because you fall victim to buying into the fact that there's a default way, there's this linear pattern based on everybody else's experiences, that's the way you're supposed to do life. And so when we're not brought up to think for ourselves, and even more importantly than that, we're not brought up to connect with who we truly are, well, then we get into adulthood and we don't know who we are. If you go ask most people, I challenge y'all, do this week, you two and the listeners, ask people, who are you? And see what they say. Because most people, they're going to tell you their name. They're going to tell you some demographic information. They're going to tell you probably their career or their hobbies, but they're not going to tell you who they are in here. They're not going to tell you their core values. They're not going to tell you what they stand for. They're not going to tell you what they want. But those are the important pieces of information that we're supposed to be designing our life around.
Yeah, 100%. And so how do you think like we help people to work or kind of start that self-discovery journey so they work that out for themselves? Like for me, it starts like way in like education system, which doesn't do that ultimately. So like I'm kind of interested in like some ways how you think as a society, like actually we can start to change that.
Yeah, I think the easy answer for a lot of people is target the youth, target the youth, target the youth. We've got to target the youth so that we can impact future generations. And that's great. And that is absolutely true. We do need to do that. But it's like, okay, well, if we only target the youth, then what are we doing with the current generations? It's like we're telling them like, to hell with y'all. Y'all just go out and live your miserable lives the way that they are now. Like, no. So we've got to make sure that we're doing things just like this, that we're doing podcasts, that we're putting out tools and resources. Like on my website, I've got a resource I created called the Ultimate Clarity Guide, which somebody can go through and it breaks it down into the core aspects of life. And they rate themselves and they say, this is how I rank in terms of the quality of my life, the desires, or the way that my life is shaping out, and all these different elements. And then we start getting conscious from there of what needs to change. And so it makes people start answering those questions. The two most important questions are, who am I and what do I want? And so by putting out pieces of content like this, with podcasts, with YouTube videos, doing things like that, by giving people tools and resources where they can actually start doing that work, that's how we create the change. We've got to start raising the level of consciousness. Consciousness is the key to change. If you don't consciously bring something into the forefront of your mind that it's an issue, you're not going to change it, because why would you? You don't even know that it's an issue. And so it's you, guys like you, doing such a great job of standing for something, for people chasing their dreams, of people living bigger and better lives. And then people like me providing tools and resources and things like that. It's every piece of the puzzle coming together to be able to target all these different demographics, age groups, and things like that.
Yeah,
sure. Leroy,
from everything you said, like, I wanted to also ask now, from your point, like, I actually want to try out your guide. Like, I'm going to go on your website and actually try it out. But I wanted to ask now, from your point, when did you realize yourself, or when did you have that definition of self, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think that we all have a very strong internal compass. The problem is, like I said, going back to the way that we're brought up as kids, we're taught to deny that internal compass. You know, there's a reason why little kids can tell you at the drop of a hat when you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? They could tell you. They can rattle those things off. Now, granted, most of those are very aspirational and are things they're not going to grow up to do, but it's just because they're following their heart. They're following the thing that they're passionate about inside right now. And so I believe that we all have that internal compass. That's why whenever I tell people going through and trying to find clarity on your calling or your purpose, whatever you want to call that, one of the best things you can do is look back to childhood and see, what was I passionate about? What did I love doing? Like, what really lit a fire inside of me? But I think that whenever it comes to, I guess, finding or reconnecting with that later in life, it's really subjective. For me, I always grew up with, from the time that I was a little kid, I always felt this great sense of calling inside of my life. Like, I felt like I was meant to do something special. I was not meant to be somebody who just woke up, went through the motions of life, and then waited for retirement to be able to live a little bit. Like, I was meant to live a big life. And I don't say that from a place of arrogance or like I'm better than anybody else. I just felt this great sense of calling. But I never leaned into it. I never leaned into it because all the stories, all the experiences of my childhood and my adolescent upbringing were telling me that that wasn't what was meant for me. And so I think that we all, like I said, we all have those experiences. It's just a matter of when do we have people or experiences around us that open our eyes to that and make us lean into it. The sad reality is, Leroy, most people never lean into the possibilities for their life or their desire to chase after those possibilities until some sort of traumatic experience happens. They have a near-death experience. Somebody around them dies. Something like that happens for people to really wake up and say that I want more out of my life. And so clarity can come at any point, but you've got to be willing to do the work. You've got to be willing to open up your eyes and say, my life isn't what I want it to be. And then from there, do the work to discover what you want it to be.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Leroy, what about yourself? Like, obviously you put that question to Justin, but I'm kind of I know like your story and background and everything, but I'm kind of interested for you, like if there was that defining moment, I suppose, that then you decided to embark on this path and, get more into personal development and business, and even, business with obviously all your different business ventures and that you have going on. Was there like that moment for you as well?
Yeah, I think for me, I had a lot of resonance to what you said there on how you just feel a deep sense of like service to the world, I guess, like you can actually provide something, but you couldn't put a finger on it, and I guess for me, I went through a point where through going through university and schooling, you are in the mindset of, like you said earlier, like, you are taught to live life based on how others are doing. When you're sitting in school, one of the things is that we are not taught that internal introspective like growth, right? You're taught to look at the board and everybody has to come up to the same standard. And if there's somebody or a certain group of kids who are able to exceed, we all look at them as examples, right? Mm-hmm. Now we go through this yearly over, and you can kind of rank yourself through where you are. And as you grow up, as you said, like, you come to a point now you're in life, and sometimes we start looking at each other and that comparison and everything like that comes into play. But we now have more things to play with. It's not just books and, so I guess you have a point where you have to truly denounce any part of that calling. As you were saying, you couldn't just live a life where you just wake up and just do that and just keep living and wait for your retirement. Because there comes a point where you have to, now that's that point I guess you're asking Luke, like you actually say, you know what, I can't take this calling, this thing that I can't put a finger on, because I can't even put a finger on my life right now. But if I do certain things. So for me, I think it was when I left uni, I wasn't able to finish uni. I went back home. It was a point where I realized, like, you know what, I am nothing. Because university schooling, it gave me a sense of purpose of waking up in the morning, getting to school, getting those grades so that you can move forward, right? Through year in, year out. But now you're at a point where I had failed uni. I'm here. I'm nothing. So you really now, I really started like looking into myself. And when I wasn't able to go back to university, that was sort of like for me a sign to really say, you know what, like you see that there is something in you. So why do you want to go back and do the same thing again of trying to have that standard and keep to that standard when you haven't even found what your own standard is? You know, because we all have a standard within ourselves that if we align living life, you know, like you said, you woke up this morning, you did what you did. It's not something that you will, you know, today it's such a, you wake up for it. It's like a child now. A child wakes up and they're ready to play. Like, you know, they don't have time to think how long the day is going to be or any of that. It's just, let's live life right now. Right now, this is the moment, you know. So for me, it was that point where I wasn't able to go back to university. And I thought to myself, you know what, let me dive into myself. Let me dive into who I am and actually like find that. And I guess, like you said, Luke, now that was like 4 years ago, but I've come up with more over the 4 years than I would have done with just that paper of a degree if I had finished a course in the last 4 years. You know, so I have more, and I guess that's when, for me, that's when it really like hit home. Like, yeah, you have something, so find it. And yeah, I'm living what I've found, you know, and there's more.
Absolutely. And going back to your question, I just realized when you were unpacking that I didn't really fully answer your question. So for me, you know, I think that people who have that great sense of calling, when we're denying it, that makes us, we feel that imbalance. We feel that out of alignment. And so it causes us to be very prone to dealing with things like anxiety or depression, things like that, and not in the clinical setting or a actual medical issue that's going on underneath. But people start to develop those symptoms in their life because they know that they're not living the life that they're supposed to be living. And that was something that I dealt with for so long. And when I got into my 20s, same exact thing. You know, I played college football. I graduated in the top 1% of my class from a great university. I had all these markers of success, but I hated my life. I absolutely hated it. And I ended up going into this really bad depression. And as I was going through this, I started developing all these physical manifestations of stress and anxiety. For 6 months, I woke up and I had all this different stuff going on, real physical symptoms going on in my body that no doctor could figure out what was going on with me. But it was because I was waking up every day hating my life. Now, other people may not experience it to that degree because it may not bother them as much, but there's still that internal rub and that friction. And for me, really the turning point, the catalyst was when I had my daughter. Because I'm sitting there and my daughter's a couple weeks old and my wife had just fed her. I'm sitting there rocking her to sleep in her rocking chair in the middle of the night. And I'm looking down at her face and I'm just playing out her entire life in my head. Like, what's she going to look like when she grows up? What is she going to do for her career? What's her personality going to be? Who's she going to marry? All these different things. And I just remember getting so excited about having a conversation with her about chasing her dreams. But then it was like, as quickly as that excitement came, boom, it was gone. I just had like this pit, this feeling of disgust in my stomach. And I just remember thinking to myself, Justin, you cannot have that conversation with her from a place of authenticity because you're not doing it in your life. And that was the catalyst. Is like, you know what? No, I'm not in a position where I can just burn the boats like people talk about and just blow everything up and go all in. But I can go all in here, which is where it matters. So it flipped a switch inside of me. And it was like, you know, from that point, it was like, come hell or high water, my mission in my life is not to tell my kids what I think it looks like from the mountaintop, but rather take them to the mountaintop and show them. And then from there, let them decide how they want their own lives to play out.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's like a few different things I want to kind of touch upon there. I'll start with the all-in thing you said, because especially within like the entrepreneurial space, I kind of feel that and kind of see that, you know, and obviously you have that experience as well. So do you think it's something that, you know, for our listeners, they have to kind of look at their own situation with and then decide if they're going to go, like, if they want to start a business, like if they're going to go in all in there or if it's a career? Because I think like there's also like the practical side to things as well, you know? So I'm just kind of interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is you've got to be able to differentiate the practicality, the day-to-day actions, and what your life looks like from the mindset piece. You know, anybody who studies personal development, anybody who studies success and things like that, you can go read any book over those topics and people will tell you that your success is 80% mindset and only 20% action. And that's not like fluff, like, oh, they're trying to make you feel better or things like that. It's the same exact thing. You know, my background was in fitness. 80% of the work was in nutrition. Only 20% of the work was in the actual exercise. But everybody wanted to ignore the nutrition. They wanted to go into the gym and they wanted to lift weights because they thought that was going to bring the result. And so when it comes to your life, people want to say things like burn the boats. And, you know, for other people like me, it's like, well, damn, I can't just burn the boats. I can't quit my job. I can't do these things that we have this misconception of what burn the boats means. Burn the boats is a mindset shift. It's saying that, yes, life is still going to happen. I still got responsibilities. I have things that I have to take care of, but achieving this goal, this dream, this aspiration, this thing that I want to do, that is going to be a priority in my life. I'm not putting it on the back burner anymore. I'm making it a priority and I'm going all in on that with my mindset and then my action. Yeah, if you're in a position where you can quit your job and you can dedicate all of your time to being able to grow your business or do this new endeavor or project, whatever that may be, look like, then that's great for you. But that's not practical for everybody. And the people who that's not their story, that's not their circumstance or situation, and they can't do that, they shouldn't feel bad about that. Because we all have our own sources of motivation and inspiration, those whys that are pushing us forward. And so even though I was in a situation where I couldn't burn the boats or go all in terms of my time, I was able to go all in terms of my heart and my energy and my efforts because I knew that the time that I had was precious. And I knew that the people who were depending on me to make the max of that time were a source of motivation that a lot of other people don't have.
Yeah. And just bring Leroy back in. Have you ever experienced that, man? With like that, you know, like that messaging of like go all in and like balance snacks. Obviously, I know. Obviously, you got a family as well. I don't have kids, so I don't necessarily have that pressure. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in that.
I think it's like what Justin said just before he ended. It becomes a very personal thing. It's like you don't know where somebody's coming from. Do you know what I mean? You don't know why they're looking at that uncommon way of doing something. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Because now in the difference of perspective, looking at your life and looking at what you need to do in order to succeed, sometimes you have the whys. Your whys are very important because they are the ones that drive you and keep you going, you know. And for me, I think what really led me to really push myself is that for me, I'm from Africa, you know, and I still have family in Africa, you know. So you have those people that are also looking up to you because you are in essence right now, you are the best person positioned to help the rest. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So now you are taking that into account, but you're also having to realize that, like you said, you have to align by what your life looks like right now, and also align that by the mindset and what you envision to see it as, you know, and see that gap and see how you can breach that gap, you know. Now, you know, in a sense of burning everything and just, you know, letting go of everything. Yeah. No, now that's where planning comes into play, like the 80%. You know what I mean? Because the 80% will keep you going with the 20% action you're able to do. You know, if that's the only time you have throughout the, you know, day, if you have 2 hours, if you have planned, you will know what to do with those two hours. You know, it's like this book I've been reading called The Habits, something about the habits, I forgot. But it spoke about that very, like what you just said, like it's 80% of, you know, nutritional planning and 20% in the gym. That will, because it's what you put in your body, and what your body has is what is going to be able to lift those weights. Yep. If you're going to lift those weights without giving your body anything, it's already, you're out of fuel already, you know. So there's not much out. So like that for me, I think that experience has come from that. I have a lot of whys. I'm not gonna lie. You know, there's a lot of whys, and even something you said earlier, like certain things can shift you, like a tragic incident. Like for me, I lost my grandfather earlier this year, and you know, I thought to myself, I made certain promises, you know, to this person, and they are now out of my life. that was really some of the hardest things, and I haven't even seen him for so long. And you think to yourself like, and that's a why. That was a why. That was a why of why you should succeed. And I guess that's really shifted me as well as I have been growing like through this journey. You realize that you're always constantly changing into different mindsets as you grow into that person, that version of success, and the more you really don't shy away, like what you were saying, you have to look at what is the problem, what is the thing that's standing in your way, and calculate your way around it, over it, whatever way you're going about it, and that tragic incident, that loss, it really made me look at myself in a way you have been doubting yourself. You've been doubting yourself because you have come this far, and here now you are, but you seem to not want to take the jump. Do you know what I mean? So there's certain things that push you forward, but those whys are what drive you to have a certain way of doing that and having a strategic planning to manifesting that. So that core why, and then you take into account the circumstances and the things that happen in your life. The why helps you to guide your action to always have the 20% in focus, in everything you're planning to do, in how you're changing your ways to go about, and, take account to however you may be limited, like it's very personal. It's a circumstantial thing. So it's an uncommon ground. You're always coming into uncommon things. Every day is an uncommon day, as much as you may go through it, the same steps. Yeah. So having the why helps you to really focus in between the 80% and the 20% action you have for that manifestation, and you bridge the gap through that. I think, going through life and everything that changes your life, and always remembering why you're doing what you've done, the sacrifices you've done, all that why, I don't know. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, man,
For sure. I mean, I read the Start With, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, beginning of this year. Like that really helped me to actually have a lot more clarity, like on obviously like what you're saying, Leroy, like on that way. Before I wasn't like, I didn't have like no direction. Like I knew what path I was on, I knew what I wanted to create, but like going through that book and like reading that book, it really helped me to understand like that why more and become more clear on it, so then you can be even more intentional within your daily actions to create ultimately the results that you want to, but also like communicating that why. I think that's something else that I really got from that book, and maybe it was like it's then helped me to just maybe like I already had it, and so it's just helped me to communicate it better, so I don't know if you guys have like read that book or whatever, but like for me, that book really helped me.
Yeah, and that's funny because I was actually on a podcast the other day, and I was talking about this exact same concept, how that question of what's your why, it's become so cliche in our culture to the point where most people don't want to answer it. They're just like, oh yeah, of course, I know what my why is. But again, that's another question. When you push people on it, they don't really have an answer for it. They don't know because they haven't taken the time to truly connect with that. And yet you wonder why they're not producing the results that they want or they say that they want in their life. Well, if you're not intimately connected with what your why is, then what's going to be that thing? Because motivation is going to come and go. We know that. You're going to wake up some days, you're going to have it, you're going to be on fire for it, no matter how great your mission is in this world. Some days you're just not going to have it. So that's why you've got to know what is that thing that's pushing you forward on the days that you don't have it. And I used to tell people all the time when I did speaking a lot that the way that I view your why is that the bigger they are, the better. And the more that you have, the better. All right. And I think that we need personal whys, but we also need missional whys. We need things that are outside of us that are driving us. But we also need intrinsic things. We have this misconception that being selfish is a bad thing. Being selfish in a way where you're it's all about you, that's a bad thing. But when you are taking care of you, when you're fulfilling yourself so that you can then go out and be the best version of you for others, that's one of the most selfless things that you can do. There's a reason why they say that you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're not fulfilling yourself, you're never going to be able to show up in the way that you need to show up in order to fulfill other people. And so what I tell people is, imagine that you're sitting there and you got this big boulder or ball, something that's heavy in front of you. And if you put forth a good amount of effort, you can roll that thing across like a flat stage or a flat surface, right? Well, now we all know that's not how life works. So the reality of the way life works is you're standing behind that big ball or boulder and you look around and there's a hill in front of you. That's how life works. All right. And for most people, let's just say for the sake of this analogy, you could sit there and if you gave every single bit of effort inside of your body to push that rock, to push, you could get it up there. But we all know we're going to have moments of weakness. We all know that things are going to happen in life where we're not going to be able to give every ounce of strength. That's where your why comes into play. And so the way that, going back to what I said about the more that you have or the bigger they are in terms of the emotion inside of you, the stronger they are. Think about it like this way. You're pushing that thing. So the more whys you have, it's like more hands that are on that rock pushing with you. And the bigger they are, the stronger those hands are. It's like rather than having some little dainty like kid hands on there, you've got like Dwayne The Rock Johnson pushing next to you. So the bigger those whys are and the more that you have of them, the more work that you do to intimately connect and emotionally connect to why you want to accomplish certain things, the better off you're going to be, the more leverage you're going to have to continue to push forward and to accomplish the things that you set out to do.
Yeah, I like that. Leroy?
You reminded me of an analogy a friend of mine just used the other day when I was speaking. And she said that if you look at yourself as a cup on a saucer, right? Like you have to fill yourself first, before if you look at yourself as the cup and the saucer as your world, the people around you, the things you do, everything else, your outside external influence, if you fill your cup first, find who you are, why do you do what you do, who you are, define that. And when you fill your cup, you are fulfilled within yourself. You don't need an external person to fill that gap you have. You don't look to your partner, you don't look to your friend, you don't need any of that because you are already full. And now once you now overflow, this is now, if you think what you have done, Justin, you created the uncommon way of helping people. You're speaking, you're doing all sort of stuff. When you were a fitness instructor, you had that, but as you filled yourself, you've come to a point where you are overflowing. There's so much of you that you have to share because now you're falling into the saucer. So it's like having your cup filled first and then sharing whatever is overflowing maintains your fullness without any like you say, it's not selfish now. That when the saucer is dry, maybe you're not as full right now, you need to replenish yourself. So it's not selfishness, it's just caring for self before you care for others.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy.
Awesome, man. One other thing I did want to touch upon, because I know you've got another podcast to get to and everything. It's just a thought that I had, because when you mentioned before about like the anxiety, the depression and everything, I got personal experiences with that. But again, like I always had the belief, like one, I would get out of that situation, and two, that there was more to life than what I was experiencing right now. And so the first thing like the doctor gave me was pills, ultimately, and I believe like, well, I'm not, so I just disclaimer, guys, for our listeners, I am not a doctor. Do not take medical advice from me. However, I did not want to take them because I believe like there was a better way. So the thought just came to me when you were mentioning that, and I wrote it down, was like, I wonder how many billions of people, have that kind of within them in terms of like that bigger calling and that, but they go and seek that medical help or whatever, and then they just get pills or they just get kind of shoved into like that kind of system,
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And that's why I'm always so careful to say, because like the type of depressive behavior that you and I have dealt with is different than somebody who has clinical depression. There are people out there that need medication. There's things that are going on inside of them physically that the medications allow them to be able to function, to be able to live a better life. And so if you're one of those people, absolutely get the help that you need. And there's no shame in doing that. But I firmly believe when you look at our entire world and we look at this mental health epidemic that is going on, there's not that many people who are clinically depressed. It's just that you can go look at the physiology of it. There's just not that many. So what's the cause? It's people living out of alignment. When you look at that research, only 3 out of 10 people are happy, and the vast majority of them aren't clinically depressed. Why aren't they happy? Because they're not living the lives they want to live. They're not doing the things. They're not showing up in the way. They're not pursuing and achieving the goals that they desire for their life. If more people would show up, if they would get that clarity that they need, if they would build the confidence behind it, they would stand firmly in that truth, and they would actually go out and pursue those things. I believe so much of a lot of the things that are going on in our world, a lot of the violence, a lot of the unrest, a lot of just the horrible, horrible things that have gone on in this world, I believe a lot of those things would be diminished. Because when you have people who are showing up and they're living on purpose, they're living from a place of passion, from a place of fulfillment, you don't have time for all that negativity. You don't have time for all that stuff. You've got a greater calling. It's the people who are upset. It's the people who are displaying those depressive behaviors because they hate their lives that lend themselves to having time to doing other things that they need those outlets to deal with the anger, with the frustration, with all the things that are going on inside of them. And so if you're one of those people who are in that situation, yes, definitely seek out help if you feel like you need it. But if you don't feel like you need it, then start going down the route of personal discovery. Start really getting clear on who you are, what you want for your life, and start aligning with that. Giving you another analogy, the way that I talk about pursuing this sense of calling inside of you is like, think about your life as a recipe, right? Think about your favorite dish, okay? You take out one key ingredient, and that could be one of your core values. That could be one of the things that you truly desire in your life. You take one of those things out from the recipe of your life. All right. The dish has changed, correct? Y'all would agree?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the dish may still be good because we all know every good dish has several key ingredients. So you take out one ingredient, the dish has changed, but it's probably still a good dish. But now you start going and taking out 3, 4, 5 key ingredients. That's not even the same dish. It may not even be any good, but it's definitely not your favorite dish anymore. That's how most people's lives look. They're sitting there and they have these things inside of them that they may know that they want, or they want to be able to show up to life in a certain way, but they're not because the circumstances or situations in their life, because they're settling for a relationship that doesn't fulfill them. They're settling for a job that they hate. They're doing all these different things to appease all these different people or chasing after other people's definition of success and not aligning with their truth and creating their life based on that foundation. So they hate everything that's going on. And that's when things start to spiral out of control.
100%. And I just bring Leroy, you back into this. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Nah, like I was just listening to that and I'm just like, yeah, like, you know, I couldn't have said anything better. Like, if you think that dissonance that we have, like, it's almost like, this is one thing that we wouldn't realize, that we all have that. It's not, it's not a need, but it's a sort of like a birthright of just having that fulfillment within self. You know, to be like, we always seem to think that riches is just a sense of money, of having money. No, riches are just your life. It's like what you know is a standard of good living, is then when you meet that standard, you feel rich. You know, it's like when you eat I don't know, let's say a potato. You know, there's a potato that you feel like, yeah, it's got rich texture. Right, and then you find another potato, maybe a bit more watery, maybe just the texture it's just not right. It's not rich, you know. It's a very clear definition between rich and not rich, but it's not about money. It's just your life, you know, being rich now. Like, you know, you have a rich relationship with people around you, you know, a rich sense of like purpose in life, you know, that we all have that. We all deserve it, but with because of life, like we said earlier, like Justin said, if we go back to how we started, it's like how we look at life and you comparing with others and how somebody is going about their life. It's a way that we have been taught. We haven't been taught to look within ourselves. And because for the better part of that formative years of your life, you know, what has been now ingrained within yourself, to look at that and remove that in your adult time, it's very hard. You know, it's much easier to just go with the trend of things than to try and really. And I guess that's why it's very hard for people to look at that life of looking within yourself, because now you are literally going against everything you've been taught, and now you're having to be very strong and wood and actually tell yourself, no, you deserve this life. Because that's the only way. You can't say you want to do this entrepreneurial life or help people if you don't feel like, yes, you can do it. You know what I mean? So like Justin said, it begins within yourself. When we look at ourselves and fill that cup, when it's low, it's that depression. Like you said, it's not clinical. It's that you're empty. You have nothing left. It's you literally, there's no ingredients to this. Like, so the life is just dull. But the more we fill ourselves, the more you fill that cup, the more you put more ingredients in your life, you realize the diversity of it. It becomes rich in color. It becomes rich as, you know, you feel light, you know? We are spirit, and your spirit needs to feel light. When it's heavy, you can feel it. That's that depression. But when you're light, it's like you're like a bird, you know? Your spirit feels like it can fly, because that's what it is. We all have that sense, and it's true, we can all attain that richness, but it's just our mindset, the mentality you've come up with. It's difficult to just let go, but it's possible, I guess, but very difficult. But yeah, man, like, yeesh, it's mad.
Awesome. Justin, do you have any thoughts on that? And yeah, then we'll dive into some like final thoughts and where people can find you online.
Yeah, the one thing that I'll say that I love that you talked about, Leroy, is that definition of success. Like I said, so many people, they're pursuing other people's definition of success, but it's like we have this canned generic definition of what success means. And for the vast majority of people, it's based on money. That's it. Like, that's their definition of success. But then you pull in every millionaire or billionaire that you see who hates their lives because their lives are out of balance. Life is not made up of just career or just wealth. If it was, that would be great. Go out and make as much money as possible. And that's why I hate whenever people say that money can't buy happiness. That's completely wrong, because happiness, like motivation, is fleeting. It comes and goes. Joy, true fulfillment, that's long-standing. That comes from within. So money can't buy joy, but it will buy a hell of a lot of happiness. But the problem is that when every other aspect of your life is out of alignment because of that continuous pursuit of success, you're never going to find the success that you desire, because success, like you just talked about, it starts in here. It starts in your heart. All right. It's a feeling before anything else. That's why one of my absolute favorite questions to ask people, and before I will work with anybody as a client, they've got to be able to tell me when they will know when they're successful. Because most people, like I said, it's a dollar amount. But if it's based on a dollar amount, I can promise you this: when you get to that dollar amount's going to go up. And when you get there, it's going to go up. And when you get there, it's going to go up. Enough is never going to be enough if it's just solely based on finance. Success has to be a feeling inside of you. The way that I like to describe success is when you wake up in the morning, going back to what you said earlier, Leroy, when you wake up in the morning, you're excited about life. Like, you're passionate about the life you get to live. And when you lay down at night, you're fulfilled.
Yeah.
You know that you're on path. You know that you're living the life that you're supposed to be living, regardless of how much money is in the bank, regardless of any circumstance going on around you. Success is a feeling inside of you. Because if you're feeling the definition of success inside of you, then that means that everything else in the outer world is taking care of itself. So get clear on that. Get clear on what success means to you in every area of life. And then again, start going out and creating your life based on those different parameters.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that. Justin, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, the best places to find me are on Instagram or Facebook. You can go on there, just put in Justin Aldridge. You'll find me on there. I come up toward the top on all those. Or you can go to my website. It's www.justinaldridge.me. You can go on there, check out the blog, learn about coaching. You can download that resource guide, that Ultimate Clarity Guide I was telling you about. And that's about it.
Awesome. So I will put all that in the description. But Justin, do you have any final thoughts or words of inspiration for our listeners to take away?
And also, just for our listeners, just tell them what you're focused on right now. What you focused on doing. What you currently getting into, I guess, as they may look into your work.
Yeah. Final thoughts would be start taking the time now. Like set aside time for you, 5, 10, 15 minutes. I don't care how long it is. Set aside time for you every single day to connect with you. We are communal creatures. We thrive in relationship, but we're always focused on relationships with others rather than relationship with us. All right. You've got to learn that selfishness is not a bad thing. All right. As long as it's geared toward you showing up as the best version of you to be able to then show up in a way to impact others. So be selfish. Start setting aside time for you every single day. And in that time, don't just sit there and sit like a bump on a pickle or something like that. Like actually utilize that time. So in that time, I want you to get crystal clear on 2 questions. All right. Who am I? Like, what are your core values? What do you stand for? How do you want to show up in the world? And then what do you want? Like, what do you want your life to look like? And once you get clear on those 2 things, spend the rest of your life making sure that the house of your life, if you view your life as a house, that you're building that house on the foundation of the answers to those 2 questions. Answer those questions, own the answers to those questions, and build your life upon those answers. If you do that, I promise you that feeling of success that I was talking about, you'll wake up and you'll start feeling that way. All right. And in terms of Leroy, like you asked, things that I've got going on, I'm just continuing to grow my coaching platform, continuing to find more ambitious people who feel stuck in life, who feel unfulfilled, who know that they're not living out their purpose or their true calling or their passion in life. And they're ready to start making those changes. They're ready to start going down that path and start doing the things necessary so that they can wake up and they can feel that way. So if you're interested in something like that, definitely reach out to me. Yeah,
for sure. And all those links, like I say, guys, will be in the description. But Justin, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it.
No worries. And Leroy, thank you, man. So guys, very quick, Leroy and myself will be back next week, same time. So we'll see you then. Have an awesome week.